Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called They Call Themselves Bluenecks, written by Adjutant Stormy. When humans were discovered locked in their home system due to lack of FTL travel, the slaver races of the galactic community saw fresh meat, a Deathworlder species to boot. They would serve well in the mines, in the dockyards, manufacturing, and anywhere hard labor was required, and people with enough money didn't want to do it. So an accord was made. The Zafri, the Ogna, and the Temti would each claim one of Earth's, Venus, and Mars to farm new human slaves. The Zafri, chief amongst the Alliance, would claim Earth, being the most populous planet. Ogna, Mars, and finally Temti would take Venus as the most junior member. At the time of contact, the entire Terran Navy of Sol contained 18 cruisers equivalents, 14 destroyer equivalents, and innumerable picket-class ships, none of which concerned the slaver races. Indeed, the three had dropped out of warp next to their largest gas giant with 15 times the tonnage of the entire system's navy. After glassing the minor moon colonies orbiting the planet, inner system domination took all of 16 standard cycles. Every space-worthy ship of their navy was an expanding ball of gas by cycle 15. However, these humans both refused to surrender and were surprisingly tenacious, if technologically backward, warriors on the ground. The United Nations had sent but one message. An older male with tan skin and white hair stood on the view screen. "I am Secretary General Utain Baku of the United Nations of Sol, and I will have you know that you have not claimed the bulk of humanity. We are fractious. I speak for but a shard, the shard that listens to my word." This, of course, took time to resolve. Where would the bulk of the pre-FTL species even live beyond these 3 rocky worlds and a handful of rocky moons? We besieged their worlds. As is tradition, we built great orbital works, kept station with our ships on orbit for fire support. We fought on Venus, Mars, and Earth with tremendous losses. After Cycle 75, we received an all-frequency message from the Terrans, but not from their besieged worlds. It was from the outer system. It was a single word: duck. Suddenly, every geosynchronous ship, orbital, and void hangar had incoming proximity alerts and went offline as near-sea comets atomized in the bright, blinding flashes. Alarms came up fleet-wide. We received another message from Terra, the same older gentleman from before. "Ah, I see the outer room has put their 2 cents in. We don't get along, but they're terribly territorial. I imagine they have already told you to get off my lawn. That would be the Bluenecks out ice miners in the outer room. I can't even tell them to put a shirt on lest they fire on my envoys. Just some good old boys. I may have offered them a lifetime supply of hooch from Old Terra to dump their loads onto you instead of the colonies. You know, they used to park those ice balls in orbit, harder to miss something just right than to hit something. And they had damn near 80 days to get that load to, 70, 80% of the speed of light. I'll say those Bluenecks have no taste in liquor, but they sure as shit know their orbital dynamics." The Invader Coalition was mauled, but not cowed. The Zafri commander screeched, "You must have expended every out-system ship for this gambit, so I am not impressed. You will bow to us one way or another." Secretary Baku laughed, a deep belly laugh, a laugh that terminated in a coughing fit. "You daft motherfuckers! There are 1 billion Bluenecks and 1 trillion ice balls in that belt. You could be here 500 years, and those tugs would never run out of ammunition. You think our ice balls are more expensive than your battleships?" End of story. Story number 2. The End of Human Piracy, written by Squirrel Bay. God King Talamon, divine emperor of the glorious Golden Horde, and the most powerful being in the galaxy, struggled against his restraints. The indignity was worse than the pain. To be kidnapped by a lowly pirate was absolutely unthinkable. He had once ordered planets destroyed and species exterminated on a whim. Trillions of beings dozens of species worshipped him as a deity. He was supposed to be untouchable. "There will be a reckoning for those human," he bellowed through swollen lips, orange blood spraying across the room. His captor turned to him and scoffed, cuffing him roughly across the head. "Behave, your highness, or I'll pull out another tooth," it said happily, holding up a pair of pliers. "Do not dare to touch me! I am a god, you fecking ape! You are nothing but a pirate!" He raged at the humiliation, screaming every insult he knew at the human, who only chuckled in response. He'd been captive for days, and they tortured him when he had refused to speak to the lowly creatures. He'd been broken eventually, but it wouldn't matter when his fleet arrived to rescue him. He was positive that Admiral Ducker would be on the way, and there was nothing in the galaxy that could stand against him. The vermin would be destroyed, and every last human in the galaxy hunted down and slaughtered. Fleet Captain Barbossa was feeling exceptionally cheerful. Every one of his Emperor's insults washed over him like a hot bath, warming him to his very soul. He relished in the anger it directed at him, hating the creature for all it represented. Decades of plan, countless lives, and thousands of hours had all led to him to this moment. He could barely contain his excitement. He had personally led the raid on the Emperor's flagship, ambushing them in deep space. The losses they had taken rankled him, but he knew the men would gladly have given their lives for this opportunity. It had required every ounce of his self-control not to immediately put a bullet in the slimy Fecker's thick skull, but it would be well worth the effort of his restraint. He would make sure of that. "What do you know of humanity, oh majestic one?" he asked suddenly. "Pirates! Criminals! Primitives!" it hissed. "And do you know why we must resort to piracy, oh great and mighty shit for brains?" "Because you are vermin!" it roared. "You do not build or grow. You only know how to take and steal from your betters." It attempted to spit at him again, dribbling blood from its chin. "Nope, as expected, you know nothing. Let me educate you. Just over 100 cycles ago, your predecessor made first contact with Earth, our homeworld. Do you know what happened during the meeting?" Silence for the creature. "The Golden Horde demanded that we enter your service as slaves. We refused, naturally, and you cracked Earth in half. Billions died." The Emperor laughed. It actually fecking laughed. What a prick, he thought. "Ours was our right. You were weak, and we were strong. Earth deserved it." He ignored the jibe. "Traitors," he named us, with orders to shoot any surviving humans on sight, who were ostracized on every planet, forced to scrape and steal just to survive. We rely on the black market, but even there we are spat on. You once claimed that you would put an end to human piracy, you fuxcellency. Well, today you may help us achieve that." The Emperor looked worried, but remained silent. A human crewman entered the room and saluted. "Captain, there are Empire ships approaching. 5 minutes until they exit warp. It looks like they brought the entire fleet." The Emperor laughed again. "You fools! You have brought ruin on yourselves. You didn't realize my fleet would have a way of finding me." "Of course we did," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "We were counting on it." The flagship rattled dangerously as it was pushed to its limits. Admiral Dakar stalked the bridge, barking unnecessary orders at the harassed crew. He knew that this would be his last campaign. As soon as the Divine Emperor was safe, he would take his own life to pay for the failure to protect him. A 50-cycle career ended in shame and dishonor. It felt like he'd been fighting the pirates his whole life. Opportunists. They fought dishonorably, materializing without warning to steal anything they could get their dirty little hands on. They would hijack any ship they found unprotected, slaughtering the crew and ejecting the corpses into the cold of space. They refused to enter pitched battle with the Empire, disappearing into the void at the first sign of the fleet. He had slaughtered thousands in his career, though it seemed there were always more. They were never a serious threat, more an annoyance and part of life in the Empire. Humans, he thought, grinding his teeth manically. They were vermin, to be shot on sight if they set foot on an Empire planet. That they had grown so bold that they would manage to kidnap the actual Emperor was shocking. He vowed that they would be purged from the galaxy for this. "Exiting warp, came the call from the bridge. The flagship lurched as it exited warp speed. The space around it filled with hundreds of smaller ships. The entire might of the Empire had answered his call. The humans were famously greedy. He would negotiate for the Emperor's release before bringing the might of the fleet to bear, destroying them entirely. Sir, there is signals coming from the asteroid belt. I advise caution. It is a perfect terrain for a
Advance! He shouted frantically. We must not waste a moment whilst the Emperor is in danger.
The fleet moved forwards into the asteroids. Captain Barbossa could barely keep the grin from his face. No, it's too fecking easy. Look at them charging in. Hook, line, and sinker. The Emperor had been brought up to the bridge and change, his mouth gagged. Through the view screen, they could see the Empire fleet hurtling into the asteroid field at reckless speeds, some of the ships dashing themselves against the rocks in their haste.
That looks close enough, he said, straightening his captain's hat. Open communications.
Admiral Dakar appeared on the screen. At the sight of the Emperor, battered, bruised, and bound in change, he sank to his knees in despair.
Please, he begged. What is your price? Name it. It's yours.
Captain Barbossa struck a flamboyant pose, pretending to consider it. He was enjoying himself immensely.
Admiral Dakar, you old prick, how are you? Human, please, we are here to negotiate for the Emperor's release. We are willing to...
In one fluid movement, Barbossa drew a pistol and fired into the Emperor's head. It exploded into bone, brain, and blood, soaking the captain in filth. Roaring with laughter at the Admiral's expression, he ended the communication.
Let him rip, boys!
The asteroids around the fleet began to explode with impossible force. Nearby ships were torn in half by chunks of debris. The captain stood, staring. The light of the explosions reflected in his eyes. Collecting the materials of the minefield had taken thousands of raids. The cost had been worthwhile, though it wouldn't be enough to destroy the fleet entirely. They needed more. Another siren sounded, and Barbossa grinned again.
Look, lads, here comes the cavalry.
The fleet's escape route was suddenly cut off by hundreds of ships warping in behind them. Human pirate ships of all shapes and sizes, painstakingly built from what scrap the humans could gather, hijacked or stolen. All of them shot their payloads as soon as they materialized. Weapons that they had to beg, steal, or borrow, hoarded for decades, all released in one wild climax. The effect was devastating. Boxed in by the exploding asteroids and the pirates, with nowhere to run, the Empire fleet was annihilated in moments. Barbossa wept openly. It was fecking beautiful. Decades of planning their revenge had come to fruition. They had lived as outlaws and thieves, struggling to survive, held under the boot of the Empire. But now, the Empire was defenseless, and humanity would not be pirates much longer. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons: Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, Lord Azrakal, Ambrose Cattell, Quantum Wednesday, Dragzoon WRE, and Blueberry Cat. Thank you very much for the support. It is super appreciated.